try for a moment to unmoor your mind from the present. Strip away the walls of the room you are in and strip away the solid ground beneath your feet. Strip away the familiar blue of the sky above you and the comforting rhythm of your own breathing.
Yes, completely unmoor yourself. We are projecting our consciousness back into an abyss so ancient, so unfathomably remote, that the very concept of time begins to fracture and lose its meaning. Before there was an Earth, well, before there was a sun, before the delicate machinery of biology ever sparked to life.
There was no staging ground for existence. There was only the screaming, swirling vortex of unorganized space energy. We are looking upon the violently beautiful orchestration of cosmic forces in the utter dark.
Right, a time when the surrounding universe was nothing but a maelstrom of raw, untamed potential. It was a deafening roar of unassociated matter and heat, just spinning in the cold, boundless theater of the master universe, waiting for the command to condense.
And you, the solitary consciousness receiving these words, you must understand your precise, astonishing place within the staggering continuum. You are a fragile, fleeting existence. You are a microscopic spark of self-awareness illuminating a fraction of a mortal moment.
Yet your existence is inextricably, physically bound to this ancient fire. The very calcium that fortifies your skeleton, allowing you to stand upright against the pull of gravity. The heavy iron that runs red through the beating heart in your chest.
Exactly. These elements are not recent inventions. I mean, they're not biological miracles generated out of thin air. They were forged, pulverized, and crystallized in the specific, localized infernos of this ancient cosmic genesis.
You are, quite literally, walking, breathing stardust. You are the biological culmination of hundreds of billions of years of meticulous, relentless, celestial orchestration.
It is with intense academic seriousness and a mutual profound reverence that we approach the Urantia papers. These ancient universal texts strip away the comforting, localized illusions of human mythology.
They do. They do not offer us poetic metaphors for creation. Instead, they document the exact, uncompromising physical genesis of this world. A planet known in the vast administrative registries of the cosmos as Urantia.
We are analyzing the architectural blueprints of our reality. I mean, we are reading the staggering mathematical chronology of a world that was born from the violent dismemberment of a dying nebula.
To really grasp this, we must begin at the true beginning, an epoch that sits far beyond the limits of mortal history. The texts provide a chronology of such startling precision that it demands absolute awe.
The numbers alone are, well, they are paralyzing. The record states that exactly 987 billion years ago, an entity of unfathomable capability traveled out from the capital sphere of Uversa.
Yes, recorded specifically as Associate Force Organizer number 811,307 of the Orvanton series. This being, operating on a level of reality that is almost entirely incomprehensible to material creatures, recognized favorable conditions.
Favorable conditions accumulating in the easterly segment of the superuniverse of Orvanton. But I have to pause us right here, because we are immediately encountering the profound scale of these papers.
The terminology alone is a massive hurdle for the finite mind.
Exactly. When a human mind hears a phrase like Associate Force Organizer traveling from a capital sphere, the instinct is to categorize it as pure mythology. But the texts present this as administrative and physical reality.
Right, and it is a vital distinction to make. We must completely discard the mortal framework of biological entities or mechanical space vessels. What we are talking about is a Paradise Force Organizer.
So an entity of pure transcendent capability.
Precisely. Their fundamental purpose is the manipulation of primordial space potency. You see, the universe, in its unformed state, is saturated with pure, unassociated energy, a potential that has not yet coalesced into measurable gravity or material mass.
So these organizers are the living catalysts. They initiate the slow transformation of that absolute energy into the physical matter that will eventually form galaxies.
Yes, they are. And when the texts speak of the superuniverse of Orvanton, they are referring to our specific galactic neighborhood, a massive administrative and physical sector of the master universe, with Uversa as its headquarters.
So this force organizer did not arrive with physical tools. They arrived with the capacity to bend the fabric of unformed space, to initiate a gravitational whirlpool.
A localized energy whirl, exactly. And the chronology continues with staggering specificity. Exactly 875 billion years ago, the Andronover Nebula was initiated.
Officially registered in the cosmos as number 876,926. It began as that energy whirl you described. But under the watchful eyes of these force organizers, it grew into a gigantic circular cloud of gas.
A mother wheel of unimaginable proportions. But here's the aspect that is so philosophically profound. After initiating this, the organizers essentially step back.
Right, they initiate this cyclone of sheer space force, and then they wait. They wait for hundreds of billions of years for the seemingly blind mechanical laws of gravity and heat to execute their design.
There is a profound tension there, isn't there? If these are divine beings capable of mobilizing space itself, why utilize the blind, grinding mechanics of physics?
Why not simply speak a solar system into immediate existence? It's a question that strikes at the very core of cosmic philosophy. To the finite mind, observing a rock fall or watching a star burn, gravity and thermodynamics appear as unthinking, purely mechanical laws.
But in the context of the vast Andronover Nebula, we are asked to understand that these laws are, in fact, the slow-acting, deliberate instruments of divine intention.
The architects of the universe do not hastily sculpt planets with their hands. They plant the seeds of gravitational consequence.
They initiate the cyclone, knowing with absolute mathematical and spiritual certainty that over hundreds of billions of years, the necessary friction, condensation, and centrifugal forces will bear fruit.
Blazing suns and habitable worlds. The breathtaking patience required for this process is a testament to their eternal nature. For a being of such magnitude, time is not a countdown.
No, time is merely a canvas upon which the physics of creation are meticulously painted. And the geometry painted on that canvas is terrifyingly beautiful.
Terrifying is the word. The text described the mechanics of the mother wheel reaching its maximum mass. As it spun, gravity's inward control began to wane against the sheer, violent outward momentum of its rotation.
The circular cloud flattened. And then the majestic horror of the spiral arms breaking away from the central nucleus commenced.
I try to visualize the sheer violence of it. Two gigantic, protruding streams of superheated gas tearing themselves away from the mother mass, spinning outward into the freezing void.
Nodding, expanding, and condensing into vast systems of physical matter.
Yeah.
And this specific disintegrating spiral, this dying mother wheel, was chosen by Michael of Nebadon, a creator's son.
He chose it to be the geographic foundation of his local universe. Out of complete structural disintegration, out of the violent death of a nebula, he chose to build the architecture of life.
It is the ultimate expression of order arising from apparent chaos. And the precision of this cosmic architecture becomes intensely personal when we arrive at the birth of our specific solitary sun.
Exactly 6 billion years ago, the great Andronover Nebula reached the period of its terminal breakup. And the sun that warms your skin today was finally born.
It was the 56th from the last of the nebula's second solar family. Out of the 1,013,628 suns birthed from that magnificent mother cloud, ours is meticulously cataloged as sun number 1,013,572.
That specific detail sun number 1,013,572, it forces a profound realization. When we, as mortals, look up at the night sky, we see an uncountable, chaotic spray of light.
We assume anonymity. We assume we are a random speck in an uncaring void.
But these texts completely shatter that illusion of anonymity. In the registries of the cosmos, there is no chaos. Every single extrusion of matter, every fiery sphere is known, numbered, logically placed, and tracked.
It implies a universe where matter itself is cherished, where the physical staging ground for the evolution of life is curated with an exactitude that borders on the holy.
Our sun was not a random spark struck in the dark. It was an anticipated, calculated event in the majestic unraveling of the Andronover system. But having finally achieved a solitary stability, our sun was not left in peace.
Far from it. The architecture required further, violent intervention. The texts bring us to the catastrophic events of 4.5 billion years ago. We must exhaustively analyze the intrusion of the Angona system.
The papers describe Angona not as a blazing star, but as an enormous, dark, solid giant of space. A massive, highly charged wanderer possessing a tremendous, terrifying gravitational pull.
As this dark Leviathan drew nearer to our solitary, relatively peaceful sun, the gravitational tension between the two bodies became apocalyptic.
Let's break down the physical mechanics of this, because the imagery in the papers is just cataclysmic. Our sun, reacting to the sheer gravitational torture of Angona's approach, began to suffer violent solar pulsation.
It heaved, it convulsed. As the dark giant reached its closest apposition, the internal limits of solar cohesion were breached. Partial disruption occurred.
Vast, unimaginable columns of superheated solar gases were violently disgorged from opposite sides of our sun. Now, logically, one might think this disgorged matter would just fall back into the fiery ocean it came from.
But the gravitational pull of Angona was so immense that stolen matter, ripped entirely from the sun's equatorial grasp, was pulled outward, forming a tapering, bulging mass.
But here is the mechanism I really want to understand. How does a violently ejected column of superheated solar gas eventually become a system of solid, rocky planets? Getting from a pillar of plasma to the solid rock I am sitting on seems physically impossible.
Well, it requires an understanding of immense heat and the absolute freezing vacuum of space. When those colossal columns of solar gas were ripped away, they were immediately subjected to the absolute zero of the surrounding void.
So the matter was no longer sustained by the internal nuclear furnace of the sun.
Right. Therefore, it began to rapidly cool and condense. The denser materials within those gas columns began to aggregate, drawing together through their own localized gravity, forming swirling knots of cooling matter.
And these knots became the physical nuclei of the 12 planets of our solar system, Monmashia.
Exactly. The lighter gases were either captured by the larger planetary bodies, forming the gas giants, or swept away by the solar winds. The solid rock of Urantia is simply the localized, highly condensed, frozen ash of that superheated solar ejection.
That perfectly explains the condensation, but the papers also highlight a massive celestial anomaly that occurred during this event. The text describes the permanent retrograde motion seen in certain satellites within our system.
Yes, and it explicitly calls this an accident, a physical scar of a celestial collision.
Right. As the Angona system retreated back into the void, 3 of its own major tributaries swung entirely too close to our massive, newly forming solar system ancestor.
The gravitational pull of our sun captured and permanently detached these 3 wanderers, injecting new foreign directional forces into our emerging system.
Let's use an analogy here to visualize this physics. It's like a massive semi-truck roaring past a smaller car on a tight highway. The sheer vacuum and slipstream of the larger vehicle can pull the smaller car entirely out of its lane,
Altering its momentum and direction completely. Yes, Angona was that massive truck, and its passing permanently altered the rotational momentum of the matter it left behind.
But we must deeply question the philosophical nature of what we term accidents in this cosmic genesis. I mean, retrograde motion, a moon orbiting in the opposite direction of its planet's rotation, is chaos.
It is a violent intrusion upon uniformity. Why would the meticulously ordered architecture of the master universe utilize these chaotic, violent intrusions to forge planetary cradles?
Perhaps it's because the architecture of the universe demands a synthesis of perfect law and violent anomaly to generate true potential.
Perfect, undisturbed uniformity might be mathematically beautiful, but it is fundamentally static.
Exactly. The accident of retrograde motion, the chaotic collision of foreign bodies, disrupts that stasis. It introduces variables, friction, elemental diversity, and new directional forces.
Without the violent intrusion of the dark giant Angona acting as a rough, unyielding cosmic midwife, our sun would have remained a solitary, barren sphere of fire, slowly burning out in the dark.
That passing dark star physically ripped the potential for life out of the sun's belly and then vanished forever into the abyss of space, leaving behind Jupiter and Saturn, which in their infancy were blazing secondary suns.
Glowing with the stolen internal fire of their mother. It is a haunting contrast to the cold, wandering darkness of the Angona giant that birthed them.
Listen to this profound truth, you who dwell upon the earth. The very ground you walk on, the soil that yields your food, the stone that builds your sprawling cities, it was all violently ripped from the blazing equator of a star.
In a massive tidal convulsion caused by a dead, dark giant passing in the night, your world is born of stellar trauma. The foundation of your existence is solidified cosmic violence.
Which brings us directly into the brutal, agonizing infancy of Urantia itself. From 2.5 billion to 1 billion years ago, this planet was a sphere of unimaginable hostility.
When the gas condensation nucleus of Urantia first stabilized into a distinct body, it was merely 1/10 of its current size. It grew rapidly, but certainly not through peaceful accumulation.
No, it grew through the ceaseless, violent, deafening accretion of space matter. Space was swarming with disruptive bodies, meteorites, and cosmic debris left over from the solar disruption.
And without a protective atmosphere to incinerate them, these bodies crashed directly and relentlessly into the planet's exposed surface. The physical consequence of this relentless bombardment is crucial to understanding the planet's core.
Because the accumulation of these massive, heavy meteoric impacts continually drove the heavier elements, the iron, the denser metals, toward the exact center of the growing planet.
And this increasing mass exponentially magnified the gravitational pressure, which in turn generated unimaginable internal heat. This mechanical process led directly to the terrifying volcanic age, roughly 1.5 billion years ago.
The Earth became a veritable fiery inferno. Picture an endless, churning, molten sea of basalt. It was a world completely devoid of any sunlight.
Heavily enveloped in a vast, continuous, suffocating blanket of boiling steam and volcanic ash, it was an age of absolute merciless fire.
To help the finite mind grasp the scale of this planetary stabilization, let's look at the actual physics of heat trapping. We could use a poetic metaphor comparing the cooling crust to a soul hardening after trauma, but the physical mechanics are staggering enough.
They are. Consider the surface of the Earth during this volcanic age like the skin forming on the surface of a boiling, thick bowl of soup.
As the outer layer of the soup hits the cooler air, it begins to form a membrane, a crust. But underneath that crust, the immense heat and pressure of the boiling liquid are still completely active, churning and expanding.
The crust traps the heat. Eventually, the pressure beneath becomes so great that it violently ruptures the surface skin, exploding outward.
This is exactly what was happening on a planetary scale. The meteoric bombardment would slow, the outer surface of liquid basalt would briefly cool and form a primitive crust. But the unfathomable heat of the heavy metals sinking to the core would eventually shatter that crust.
In global apocalyptic volcanic eruptions, the planet's fiery torment was not a static state. It was a desperate, violent cycle of trapping and releasing heat, which was the absolutely necessary crucible for the ultimate stabilization of a solid world.
And here we must analyze the limits of mortal science in interpreting the remnants of this crucible. The Urantia papers explicitly address the radium clock used by human scientists to measure the age of the planet.
Yes, we must explain clearly and deliberately why this modern metric, while scientifically sound in its methodology, is fundamentally flawed when seeking the true ancient age of the world itself.
Modern geologists rely heavily on radiometric dating, measuring the radioactive decay of elements like uranium to determine the age of rock. The Urantia texts acknowledge this mechanism, right?
They do, but they point out a massive blind spot. The radioactive elements found in the upper layers of the Earth's crust were primarily brought here by that exact, relentless meteoric bombardment we just discussed.
Let me make sure I'm fully unpacking this pushback. Are the texts saying that our geologists and their radiometric measurements are completely wrong?
Not wrong in their mathematics, no, but profoundly mistaken in their geological context. The radium clock is accurately measuring the decay of those elements.
But what the scientist is actually dating is the cosmic dust and the meteoric debris that fell upon the crust after the core was already formed.
Exactly. The measurement reflects the planet's recent meteoric acquisitions. It completely hides the true, vastly more ancient age of the world's molten core.
Mortal science peers only at the surface veneer of the planet's history, mistaking the final layers of paint for the foundation of the house itself.
That is a staggering paradigm shift. It completely recontextualizes how we view the ground beneath our feet. And what a horrific hostile veneer it was during those atmospheric terrors.
We have to linger on the specific deadly conditions of this pre-life era. There was a complete and absolute absence of free oxygen. The sky above that molten basalt sea was a choking, heavy mixture of water vapor, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen chloride.
The texts describe a sky that quite literally rained liquid rock. The continuous volcanic outgassing and the ceaseless combustion of the incoming meteoric swarms kept the atmosphere depleted, thick, and permanently dark.
The relentless, deafening bombardment of those meteoric swarms regularly pierced the thin, evolving atmospheric shield. It was a world entirely hostile to any conception of biology.
An agonizing, churning cauldron of heavy chemistry and kinetic destruction. Yet the fires eventually, inevitably began to bank. Between 1 billion and 900 million years ago, a profound, heavy silence began to fall over the tormented planet.
As the relentless volcanic action finally began to equalize the intense internal heat pressure, the rocky crust thickened and cooled sufficiently to allow the vast blanket of atmospheric steam to condense.
It began to rain, and it rained until the first ocean formed. It was a single, planet-wide freshwater ocean covering the entire sphere to an average depth of 1 mile.
The deafening, endless noise of the meteoric impacts and the roaring volcanic eruptions finally gave way to the endless dark lap of global waters. The dichotomy is almost impossible to hold in the mind.
The transition from a sphere of absolute roaring fire to a sphere of absolute silent water.
And then, from the depths of this immense Pacific Ocean came the slow, agonizingly gradual emergence of the first and only continental landmass.
As the Earth crust thickened, the ocean floors depressed under the colossal weight of the cooling lavas, and the lighter granite landmass was the thrust upward.
Piercing the surface of the water, rising into the heavy, carbon-rich air, consider the profound spiritual and existential weight of that specific epoch.
Picture a completely desolate, silent, water-bound world, spinning in the dark void of space. A singular, massive, barren continent of jagged, lifeless stone jetting out of a global ocean.
The entire planet was in a state of suspended animation, waiting for a destiny it could not possibly comprehend. We must ask ourselves, why must the foundation of life be laid in such profound isolation and absolute desolation?
Because the physical, unshakable stabilization of the crust is an absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for biological and spiritual emergence. You cannot build the delicate, microscopic cathedral of biological life upon a foundation of liquid basalt and raining fire.
The desolation we are describing was not an abandonment by the cosmos. It was a sterilization. It was a necessary purification.
Think of it like a pristine, sterilized surgical theater being meticulously scrubbed and sealed off before a delicate operation can begin. The silence of the solitary world ocean was the clearing of the planetary stage.
The world had to be swept completely clean of its chaotic, violent infancy so that the incredibly delicate, complex electrochemical formulas of living matter could be planted without being instantly annihilated by a meteor or boiled by a volcano.
The isolation was the womb. And what an incredibly unique, highly volatile womb Urantia was destined to be.
The papers document that exactly 900 million years ago, the first Satania scouting party arrived. A celestial commission of 24 members descended upon this barren, silent world.
Once again, we hit a wall of specific, hierarchical, cosmic administration. The texts mention these 24 members included Lananandek's sons, Melchizedek's, and life carriers.
Before we discuss what they decided to do, we have to clarify what these entities are. Are these just angelic titles, or do they serve specific mechanical functions in the universe?
They are highly specific administrative and functional orders of celestial beings. The Lananandek's sons are primarily executives and administrators. They govern local systems of planets.
And the Melchizedek's?
The Melchizedek's are widely known as problem solvers, educators, and emergency administrators throughout the local universe. And the life carriers, perhaps the most crucial to our immediate existence, are the specific order of beings entrusted with the design, carriage, and implantation of biological life onto barren evolutionary worlds.
This diverse commission surveyed the cooling continent. They analyzed the shallow inland seas forming on the landmass, and they returned to their system capital with a momentous administrative recommendation.
They chose to place Urantia on the Life Experiment Registry. We need to expand extensively on what that decision actually meant, on the profound mechanics of becoming a decimal planet.
The texts explain that in our local universe of Nebadon, the vast majority of inhabited worlds are peopled in strict accordance with established, standardized, proven life techniques.
But Urantia is designated as a decimal planet, one world in every 10. On these specific isolated spheres, the life carriers are unleashed from the standard, mandated Nebadon life patterns.
They are permitted to experiment, they are given the mandate to modify, to push boundaries, and to attempt to improve the fundamental formulas of biological existence.
You, listening to this, must truly feel the philosophical burden of being an experimental world. Let this staggering truth sink deeply into your consciousness.
To be born on a decimal planet is to be the universe's ultimate biological crucible. The flora that grows in the soil outside your window, the fauna that roams your forests, and the very biological vessel you currently inhabit.
Your fragile, miraculous human body, they're unique. They're entirely unprecedented. They are never to be exactly duplicated anywhere else in the endless expanse of the cosmos.
You are not a standard factory-issue biological creation. You are the living, breathing result of a divine, meticulously calculated cosmic risk.
When we contrast this with the standardized, highly predictable evolution of neighboring worlds, the reality of our existence becomes almost terrifying. On non-experimental planets, life unfolds with a mandated symmetry.
A safe, proven, and relatively smooth progression. But Urantia was granted raw, untamed, highly variable potential. The life carriers took immense cosmic risks on this planet.
They manipulated the formulas of life, introducing biological variations that allowed for far greater adaptability, greater resilience, but also opened the door to enormous, unforeseen biological volatility and suffering.
We must express a solemn reverence for these beings of pure intelligence. They were not playing haphazard games. They sought to forge a superior biological vessel, one capable of housing a mortal will that could eventually navigate the supreme heights of spiritual attainment.
They risked the stability of the biology to maximize the potential of the spirit, and so began the agonizingly slow dawning of biologic time.
600 million years ago, the Commission of Life Carriers themselves physically arrived on the shores of that barren, silent, solitary continent. But they did not immediately initiate the spark of life.
No, they waited. They possessed a cosmic patience that utterly defies mortal comprehension. They waited for 50 million years.
They stood by on the barren rock as the physical turmoil of the planet subsided even further. They watched the incredibly slow continental drift begin to tear the singular landmass apart.
Waiting for the exact, perfect geophysical moment when shallow, salty, highly sheltered inland seas would form. I am continually arrested by this specific point.
I cannot fathom the experience of waiting 50 million years for a puddle of water to become slightly more hospitable. What is the actual experience of time for beings who watch mountains rise and fall like waves lapping on a beach?
For 50 million years, they simply observed. They watched the slow, grinding tectonic shifts. They meticulously measured the changing salinity of the primeval waters.
They waited for the atmospheric filtration of deadly ultraviolet light to reach an exact percentage. To a life carrier, 50 million years is not a delay. It is merely the careful, necessary preparation of a nursery.
They do not experience the frantic, fleeting urgency, the constant ticking clock of mortal life. They experience time as the slow, majestic, unyielding unfolding of the Father's will.
And then, after that unimaginable vigil, the precise, mandated moment arrived. 550 million years ago, the exact conditions were met.
And the life plasm was finally planted in the hospitable warm waters of those shallow seas. In 3 specific simultaneous marine implantations, the life carriers catalyzed the lifeless chemical formulas.
Through their own actual persons, the vital spirit spark was imparted into the matter. The inert, meticulously assembled chemical elements were suddenly ignited, becoming living, reproducing plasm.
The great, chaotic, beautiful adventure of biological evolution on Urantia had officially begun. We direct this unhurried reflection, this entire staggering timeline, back to you, the listener.
The eons of screaming, chaotic fire, the massive, deafening impacts of crashing space matter, the violent birth of retrograde moons.
The silent, heavy, boiling oceans, the desolate, singular, jagged continent, and the patient 50 million year vigil of the life carrier standing on the shores of a lifeless, salty sea.
None of this was random. None of it was in vain. Every tectonic groan, every atmospheric adjustment, every drop of rain that cooled the basalt was meticulously, deliberately orchestrated.
It was all an impossibly vast prelude. A prelude spanning hundreds of billions of years, stretching from the vast, swirling, organized cyclone of the Andronover Nebula down through the violent, torn birth of your solitary sun.
Down through the meteoric agony of the primitive Earth, right down to the heavy iron and the beating heart within your chest. It was all designed, all endured, so that you could possess a biological mind capable of looking back into the terrifying abyss of time.
Capable of understanding the intricate, majestic truth of its own genesis. This is not myth. This is the cosmic reality of your existence. Join us in our next session as we journey further into the profound secrets of the Urantia papers.